We're up. Paul Ribbons. It's been
Yes.
a long time since I saw you properly last, as we were just saying, backstage before we started talking. And a beautifully serendipitous podcast, this one, because we reconnected about a week ago. Because did you send that message out to everyone you knew?
I was picking who I was sending it to.
Yeah, I was like, "Ooh, Paul needs to come on the podcast. Why didn't I think of that?" And then what happened was the podcast guest for today is really sick with COVID and can't speak. So actually messaged me saying, she was really sorry.
Right.
Can we reschedule? I was like, yep, absolutely. I'm going to text Paul. I'm really excited to have you on. And boy, you've had a journey. And we were just saying before we came on, what a shit show 10 years can be, and what an amazing 10 years can be.
Yeah.
I'd like to start. I want to go back kind of to the beginning. So I met you in London. I'm not even sure. I want to say 15 years ago. Could have been a bit more. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out when it was.
I think it was probably around 2012, 13, around that sort of time, I think.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, actually, we were just talking about cycling, but I'm wondering that. So my brother died in a cycling accident. I don't know whether you knew that. I'm wondering if it's just before that. Yeah, he was one of the lunatic cyclists that you're talking about. We were talking about before. It was all on him, but we can talk about that another time. But so I remember being fascinated by you when we met at a property event, because you are the polar opposite to what I do in property, and you don't hold anything, you flip things on. You just told me before we came on, 3 weeks is a long kind of how long you keep a property for. So anyone listening's like, what the hell? And I'd like to go back a bit before that and just, who is Paul, for people who don't know you. And actually, I'm kind of aware. I feel like I know you, and we've sort of been connected. We don't actually know each other, really. We've met, and I think I just have a belief that we meet people, or I meet people, and I just feel like, I don't know, we were probably brother and sister in a past life, because I'm a bit woo-woo sometimes. So I had that kind of connection, but actually, we don't really know each other. So
no.
Take me back. Who is Paul? Give me a little.
Paul is a very fortunate man. Although he's had a very tough life. I grew up. My mother passed when I was 3, and I had a pretty poor upbringing. I've got a condition called dyslexia, and it wasn't picked up at school. Lots of bullying. I was very weak as a child. I had asthma myself. My mum died of asthma. So I was the kid that when you're in the playground and the team captains are picking the teams, I was the one they did not want on their side. They would rather play without me than with me. Yeah. So I was left on my own a lot when I was a kid growing up, very lonely. I'd say lonely. It was my choice. I actually liked it that way.
Sure.
And my dad said to me when I was a kid, I had a Saturday job. I was a grafter when I was a kid, and I had a Saturday job in the baking trade. And my dad said to me, "Look, if you get into food, clothes, or housing, you can't go wrong. You'll always have a job." So I had a Saturday job in the bakery trade, and they offered me a job for when I left school. I didn't have any qualifications. I didn't even go for the last year. I was working in the bakery, so that was my career choice. That was it. And my past really sort of caught up with me and knocked me off balance. And I'm so far removed from that younger lad and that kid that grew up. It's ridiculous. And then I had a girlfriend, and she said to me once, "Look, you're going nowhere. You're a waste of space." I was living above the bakery. And she got a job uptown in the city, and she was mixing with people who were going places, and so she gave me the elbow, and it was the kick up the arse I needed, really, because I then made a decision. I was 23. I realised I'd lived longer than my mother had. She was 23 when she died, and I thought, right, that's it. I'm not going to accept mediocrity any longer. And I'm going to get her back, So that was my mission, to get her back. And I was going to buy a flat, and I was going to change my job. And everyone thought I was bonkers. Yeah. I was really this kid, no qualifications, is a complete waste of time. He's a loser, and he's talking about buying a flat, changing his job, and getting his girlfriend back. Well, getting the girlfriend back was quite easy. It wasn't a hard one. And I promised her that I'd brush my act up, which I did. I bought a flat within 10 months. And it's funny because one of the reasons why she gave me the elbow, I numerous things happened to me during my teenage years, and one of them was I lost my driving license for driving cars without no insurance, without any tax, without any MOTs, and we was just real naughty kids. And because I was, I lived on my own, and so I didn't give a shit. And I smashed my car up, and the guy sued me because I didn't have any insurance. And as I was buying the flat, he actually got his judgment. And there was no way I was going to let the judgment stand. I don't know if you know, but if you go to court and someone gets a judgment against you, as long as you pay it within 28 days, it doesn't register. So I had to pay him £1,200. Now, £1,200 doesn't sound a lot of money today, but in 1986, it was a lot of money. It was my deposit for my flat. And then I managed to still buy the flat, still pay him off, and got the flat. And then while I was buying the flat and going through the process, I was watching these estate agents thinking, I could do that. And that was it's my mantra. It's always been my mantra. I could do that. And so I said to the guy, how'd you get into this game? And he said, you have some qualifications and this, that, and the other. I thought, oh, no. But he told me he used to be a quick fit fitter. So I went, well, they take anyone then. And he went, no, not quite. He said, I worked at Quick Fit while I was at university. Right, that was my sort of part-time job to pay the bills. And so I got friendly with him. And when I come to sell the flat 9 months later, I've done really well on it. I bought it for 28 and sold it for 42 within 9 months. He was selling it for me, and I managed to blag my way into his office and get a job. And that was effectively the process that I went through, from getting my girlfriend back, getting the flat, and changing my job. And that day changed my life. And everything's different. And I was an agent during the latter 80s, which was a good time, and then went into one of the worst recessions we've known in the latter 80s to early 90s. And we had interest rates, the base rate topped at 15% in September 92. So it was real tough times to try and
my parents lost their business in that recession. We moved to, the reason we're in Wales now is because of that. Well, not because of that recession, but that whole world of, we moved back from being abroad. Dad had started a business. It was hydroponics, so it was too advanced for the time. No one had heard of it. Didn't get anywhere. Kept piling money in, and then it was just like, no, that's it. And we moved to Wales, and we were within a couple of months, I think, of house being repossessed, and he got a job, and that kind of saved us. But they lost everything. Savings a lot, everything.
Yeah, it's crazy times. And people, anyone I know that's been involved in property recently doesn't understand what it's like to have a recession. So I was, I'm going to blow my own trumpet now. I was really good at selling houses, even in the recession, because I understood some basic principles. The first basic principle is, this is not anything to do with property. It's got absolutely fuck all to do with it. All right, it's to do with people, and that's all I knew. And that basic principle is that if I could work out a way to make it affordable for someone, then we'd either get the price reduced, or we'll get an inducement from. You can't do it so much now because they don't allow cashbacks or I mean, but you're going to start seeing it with new builders. They'll offer to pay someone's mortgage for a year or something like that. You start to see inducements coming through. So I was aware of this, worked hard, really hard. In that time, the girlfriend I had, we'd split up, and I got married and had kids, which was 2 kids, a girl and a boy, and then that didn't last very long, unfortunately, about 4 years, and we got divorced, and then I had nowhere to bring the kids, so I found myself in a situation where I actually sold my property to move in with this my ex-wife. And so I didn't have a property. Fortunately, I sold it at the top of the market in the back end of the 90s. And then I'm homeless effectively. I was living with my grandmother, and okay, got to buy a house. I've got no choice. So I bought a house so I could take the kids there, and then I went self-employed. Literally the same time as getting the mortgage, I went self-employed because I wanted more time with the kids, and we had issues on when I could see the kids, and my boss was quite hard because people don't realise working for an estate agent, it's hard work. It's not easy. It's not easy. So I went self-employed. I was acquisition agent effectively, or deal sourcer, or whatever you want to call it. I had 4 clients who used to pay me £1,500 cash for each property I'd find them.
Yeah.
Really good at it. I know what makes a good deal. And then one of them said to me and you, 50-50. Come on. I'll put the money up, you put the work in. I went, all right. He said, but 50-50 means 50-50. And one of the very first deals that I bought for him was a house in Forest Gate in East London. It shows how long ago it was 40 grand. I mean, today that house is probably 400 grand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so 40,000, it needed substantial works, and it had bow flank wall, it had a bay dropping out, it was in a conservation area. So you couldn't just do a crappy little job on it.
You couldn't put a lick of paint on and walk away.
And I thought the average refurb at the time was 12 grand, and I thought, well, 25 would cover that. And the house was worth 85,000 done up. So 40, 25, 65, plus a bit of costs. You're in for 17, 15 grand. We'd have done a refurb for 15 grand in them days. Probably you wouldn't today, but them days you would do. And so I thought it was fairly safe. And then we exchanged contracts, didn't have Bob the builder. His name was Bob, and he was a builder. And he came round and he went, Paul, are you sure? I went, what? He said, this is a technical term for it. It's fucked. He said, it is absolutely knackered. He said, we'd have to rebuild this, do this, can't do this. I said, what? He said, your estimate is you're way off. Went, well, how much then? He went 60 grand. And now I'm good at maths. 40 and 60 is 100. The house is worth 85 plus our costs 105. You've got before you go anywhere, you're gonna have a 20 grand loss. And so I got my new business partner with me, Eddie Man, saying, "Oh, oops, I think I cocked up." And he said, "Well, no, it's really straightforward. We'll stick it in the auction, and we'll put it in for 20 grand." I mean, we paid 40. Would you rather do 20 grand now or 20 grand in 9 months time?
With all the work.
All that aggravation. And he said, 50-50? I went, yeah. He went, 50-50 means 50-50 profit or loss. So I was on for a £10,000 loss before I even started. And I thought, oh, shit, I've made a real cock up here. And it went to auction, and it ended up selling for 52,750. And in that moment, a strategy was born, because I thought, ooh, what happened there? And my brain goes 100 miles an hour thinking, room full of people, cheap looking house, really cheap guide price. Wow. So I looked at Richard, and we had about 4 or 5 bits coming in, and I said, the rest of them? He said, I'm ahead of you, mate. Don't worry. He said, we're going to put them all in auction. And that was it. And then we've been doing it ever since. And we still do it to this day. It still works. Same formula. Sometimes I might enhance them by trashing them a bit more on the outside, because they don't want to look too nice going into an auction. Because if you see a nice house in auction, do you think you're going to buy it cheap?
No. Well, and you want to, and there's a whole thing. Just think about what I would think and be like, what's wrong with it? What can't I see? Why is it in the auction? Why aren't they selling it normally?
It looks crap. You know why it's in there. So that's what I've been doing. This industry affords me a wonderful life, where I've acted like since 1996 is when we started doing this. I've acted like I'm semi-retired. I do what I want when I want. I've got the freedom to choose to go and do what I want, and this business allows me to sit on a beach and do what I do, or sit in this office, or I'll do what I want. And I've had some challenges in the last 10 years. I think I mentioned to you earlier. My son, my youngest, came out in 2012, said, Dad, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. And she decided to take the plunge. She was 6'6", so you imagine that 6'6" kid deciding that she wants to be a woman, so she stuck out like a sore thumb anyway, bless her. And then she became Zoe instead of Harry, and she had, our life was fraught with her mental health issues, and then late last year she couldn't cope any longer and took her own life. So we've had that to deal with, which is tough. But through it all, I've got a wonderful family that was very tight. My oldest daughter, my stepson, and I've now got grandchildren. But it takes a lot out of you, makes you reevaluate life, and ask yourself certain questions. What's more important, so that's where I've got to so far, really.
It's massive, isn't it? What life throws at us and what we deal with. I mean, just my kids are 2 and 4, so I'm at the beginning end of said parenting journey. And it's just huge. It's like we can't control what's going to happen. There's been a story in Wales this weekend of I think it was 5 kids, and it's made national press now. They went out on Friday night and they were in a car crash, and no one found them till I think Monday. So they were reported to the police, but three of them dead. And it just, it really got me. I was like, geez, you just, you think, oh, they're grown up now, they'll be all right. It's just not. And I lost my brother when I think we must have met before the shit show that happened in both our lives. Possibly. It's that whole Chris, my brother, dying in a cycling accident. What things I worried about for him. He's 2 years younger than me. I didn't worry about that, ironically. Getting that phone call, it's just, what do you take looking back? Like, are you far enough away from the journey in time and sort of dealing with it now to look back? And what do you say to people who are dealing with it? Like, what would you say to other parents who are dealing with a similar thing? Like, what?
It's funny because one of the reasons why we're on here today is I've done a podcast recently, and I've done 3, and I've done one about resilience, and I did another one about extreme loss. And I actually talk about that in that podcast, and it's everyone's different. Everyone deals with it differently. I was shocked at how I dealt with it. I was expecting myself to be like when my grandmother died. In quiet moments I'd have a little cry, and you're sad, but when it's one of your kids, I can't express how tough that is. But I saw pictures on TV when you see these poor mums in the Middle East where they lose their kids, and you see them screaming and howling and wailing. And I was like that. I was when they knocked on the door, the police officers. I saw the police car. I actually went for a walk with a dog, and as I left my house, I thought it's unusual to see a police car around here. Very unusual. Yeah. Hang on. And as I looked back, I could see them parked outside by my house. So I quickly took the dog, brought them back, and let them in the car. So I thought they must be either in my house or something. And I'm thinking, what have I done? Because when I was a kid,
what have I done? What the coppers want? So natural, though, isn't it? When you see a police person.
When I was a kid, I was a naughty kid, so that was one of my fears anyway. So I've bowled in. And they told me, and it wasn't a surprise, but it was a complete shock. It was just like a freight train hit me. And for the previous 10 days, we'd had warning that she was in a bad way, and I brought her home 10 days beforehand, and then got her back on track. And this was a common theme. She'd go down, and I'd come and pick her up. And
was she living on her own? Did she have her own place?
Yeah, she had her own flat over in Reading, and she's very independent. And so every now and again, I say every now and again, once every probably 1 or 2 years, she'd come back here, recharge herself, because And then she'd go back home. And so I thought I got her to a good place before I took her home. And I was a bit apprehensive about leaving her because she threatened it 10 days before. But she passed in a very peaceful way. And when they told me, my immediate reaction was, did she suffer? She'd already told me that she'd worked out how she was going to go. I'm not going to tell you how she went, because anyone watching this, if they are in a vulnerable position, it could give them ideas.
And you know, one of the biggest barriers to suicide is actually if the methods are taken away. So I really appreciate you saying that, because actually when people know that there is a quote unquote easy way, I'd say
people I think people want to know sometimes, and I think it's terrible, really, but I think because it was such an effective method, that's the reason why I don't want to.
Sure. And what a gift to you that she didn't suffer, right? Like there's got to be some, Jesus, there's not a lot of great in someone passing, and if there can be some.
And that's the interesting thing, because that's your point, was how do you deal with it, and that's the point I'm trying to get to now, really, which is she done it in a way where she organised everything. She left memory sticks with all her favourite music on, photos and letters to everyone. And these letters, my letter was 6 pages long, detailed explanation of what she thought about her dad. She couldn't ask for a better dad, father, friend or mentor. I saved her life on multiple occasions, picked her up when she wanted to lay down and die, and made her a stronger person. And she said to me one phrase that I've held on to, and that phrase was, if anyone can take a shit situation and turn it into something worth fighting for, that's my dad. Wow. And I repeat that to myself on a regular basis, probably daily, because the first place I went to, because when someone's taken their own, I don't like the word suicide. And so you'll hear me say my daughter took her own life, because I think if someone's committed suicide, committed sounds like they've done something wrong. Where she took her own life, she decided to end it. That was her choice. First thing I find most people do is they go into, I did it, that's my fault for letting her go back, I could have saved her. And then when I got a letter, I realized I couldn't. She explained her reasoning behind how she did it, and she apologized for literally blagging me. She said, I lied, barefaced lied to your dad. I had every intention of going back and doing it.
Wow.
So, but the letter gave me solace. And
yeah, but it did.
And through it all, I'm looking for something positive I can cling to from this. And so there's that mantra of, if anyone can take a shit situation, that's what I hold. I hold the thought that I know that she didn't suffer. I had a detailed explanation of why. And I went to a meeting for survivors of bereaved suicide. And around that room, people were talking about, they didn't know why. They were asking questions. There was one woman whose son rang her 2 hours before he took his own life. And she's got to live with the fact that, had she taken the call or been there to take the call, could she have saved his life? And it must be really challenging for someone, because they're going to live with that guilt for the rest of their life. And somebody else was estranged from their kid and said that they wanted to go and knock on their door, and then they got a letter saying, well, actually, I wished I'd have made an effort. And so that woman knows, if she'd have knocked on the door, she'd have got a response. So it could have been so much worse. So I'm looking at how can you find something positive in someone dying? It's very difficult to do that, but you have to find something. You have to find it. It's like your brother. It's the memories that you have with him. It's them precious moments you cling to, because it's tragic. He's gone. You know, Zoe's gone, and you have to find some sort of meaning in it. Some sort of, well, your brother died what he loved doing.
Yeah.
You know,
he really did, and it's that thing. I think that the thing that gave me a huge amount, and you're kind of alluding to it here, but just to be really explicit about it, and Dr. John Martini talks about it in all his work, is that everything in this world is balanced. So however horrific it is, there is just as much greatness, but it's our job to find it, I believe.
Through adversity comes positivity. That's my mantra.
They're not separate. It's like, if the people that have been through the biggest shit, like what you've been through with Zoe, is just massive. So what comes out of it for the positive is huge. And I think people don't always find that. I think the people that are left devastated ongoingly, it's because they haven't kind of uncovered the light almost. It's like they're just still in the dark and they don't realise
it's funny you say that, because I was explaining this to someone the other day, and they said, you know, because I honestly, yesterday I had a really bad day, really shit day. My wife asked me, "How you doing?" I started crying. But I have more good days than shit days now.
Yeah.
And I was about to say something, and oh yeah,
so darkness and light.
So the pain is part of life. Suffering is optional. And to cling to the negativity of someone passing rather than the positives or the meaning, then you're suffering unnecessarily, and suffering through choice. Some people make that the story of their life. Like, I didn't know your brother died in a cycling accident. You probably didn't. I might have mentioned it in my book about my mum dying when I was a kid, but I don't go around telling everybody. It's not my story of my life. It's even though it was, again, positivity out of that came from allowing me to be independent, because I've not got my mother's, you know, I'm not clinging to my mum as a little kid, you know. So you have that severance of the apron strings that enabled me to emotionally stand on my own 2 feet and not worry about what people think, because I'm not attached to all that. I had that nurturing. So I think so suffering is optional, and I realized that, and I wanted to suffer to start with, because I wanted to grieve for my daughter, and I wanted to stay in that space, because what I wasn't prepared for, and this is something, I don't know if you found it with your brother, but when something traumatic happens, it's like a bomb going off, and you've got this shock wave that's 360 degrees, and that affects your past, it affects your present, it affects your future, affects decisions that you make, you know, because of what's happened. It's affecting your present, because obviously this is you're living in the present, but it also affects your past. So if my mother passed, I never grieved for my mother, and I had this grieving process for 2 people. In fact, 3, because I didn't grieve for Harry, because I lost my son when Harry became Zoe. So there was all these facets of grief that and I equate it to Pandora's box. Like, ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark?
No.
Never seen Raiders of the Lost Ark?
No. I'm going to write it down, though. I feel like I need to.
You need Harrison Ford. And they've got the Ark of the Covenant, which is a sacred box, and that's where I used to put all my bad shit. Right, it was all in that box, right?
Yeah.
And then
once the lid, put it over there.
It never comes up, and if it did come up, then I would either distract myself from something or stop going there. Very, 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 very few times I'd been there. And even in counselling, for years, I say not years, but years ago, I had counselling, and that they couldn't get anywhere near it. But as soon as Zoe passed, it was like the box had opened, and this power came out and just consumed me. and it was difficult to deal with, really difficult, and I knew I had to go through that process of, and I never do this. If you look at my feeds from previous years, my social feeds, it was never about personal stuff. And this is the first time I ever put on my social media post that my daughter had passed away. My trans daughter had passed away, took her own life. Their funeral's at so and so. Please let everyone know. It's the first time I've ever done anything like that, ever. And I publicly talk about it on podcasts now because it's part of my healing process. And I realise I can't run from it anymore. I've got to face it, and one way to face it is to talk about it. You know, you can sit in a therapy room, but if I had a text message from someone who'd watched one of my podcasts and said it gave me a gift, and it's made a huge difference to them. So not only am I getting something out of it, other people are as well. So so that's where we are.
Wow. And it's in that sharing, isn't it? It's in the world of the stuff that's just not talked about. As humans, we don't talk about the pain and how hard things are, and what grieving's like. That was a really good analogy of, well, we see women wailing on TV, but for you to actually say that's what it was like it was fucking horrific. It's like we don't see that on social media where everything's beautified and everything's perfect. I remember giving birth going, fuck, that was messy. Gave birth at home as well, so it was like extra messy because in the hospital it's all like they have the ability to clean it up quickly. Well, there's a bedroom carpet, that's gone, that's wrecked. And it's like this weird, and I don't know, I sort of see it across everywhere, even because I used to be a chef, so I'm like with food, like.
Now you reminded me. You used to be a chef, yeah.
So when I was in London, I was cooking for a Saudi family as their private chef, and it's like there's something about life today where we don't talk about the mess, and it doesn't matter whether it's a pre-packaged diced up chicken breast that people scoop into a pan and don't dare touch, rather than actually having a chicken and cutting it up, which for me is just normal because I'm a chef, right? So it's no big deal. But I've got people who've watched me do that go, oh my God, how can you do that? I'm like, how can you not do that? Like giving birth, I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculously messy. Why did no one tell me there would be a lot of fucking gore? Like it was just horrific. You only ever see the baby come out and everyone goes, and it's kind of a bit icky. They don't tell you about the pints of gunk that come out with it, really. And it's this, and like
I think there is a certain element of not talking about certain things. The other one is which I'll be going down a route, which will lead me on to sort of like another subject we was talking about earlier, but the mental health issue that Zoe experienced, the bipolar, the manic depression, and the ups and downs that she suffered in the last 10 years of her life. It's not spoken about, mental health. I've got to hold my hands up because when one of your kids are going through it, it makes you have a very different view on things, and you realize that mental health is actually quite a serious thing. And in my day, when I was younger, I used to bang people up in institutions, if they weren't mentally stable or they weren't coping very well. You got sectioned, and you got sectioned over the silliest little things. So now we're not locking people up, and we're trying to deal with people, and the population is getting bigger, and it's worse on social media because people are exposed to, as you mentioned, these wonderful lives that people have got. Look at me. It's all through a filter. It's all through and most of it's bullshit. We know that. They're trying to,
and even knowing it makes no difference though. Even knowing that it's bullshit, our brains, when we're seeing it, it's like we know it's bullshit, but it still affects us. We think everyone else is having a great life and we're struggling.
I think the general public do think like that. I don't. I won't allow myself to think that way because I see it for what it is. But you're right. I think it's all about people getting their dopamine hits from likes and interaction on their posts, and if someone doesn't agree with them or gives a bad comment, it affects people, and it's a sad situation really that we're in. So I want to raise the mental health issue. I'm not going to bang on the trans issue because even though she was transgender, that was her choice. I think what was more of a problem for her was her mental health. She first came out. When she lived in Canterbury when she was at university, and her university digs. She came out and said, "I want to be a woman. I want to be known as Zoe."
Yeah.
So that was the birth of Zoe in Canterbury, and then she died in Reading. So I'm an avid cyclist. So one of the cycling things I'm going to be doing for charity. I think there's two charities that I want to ride for. One's Mind, and another one's called Papyrus, which is a prevention of suicide in young adults, and that goes up to 35 and down. And I'm going to do it's 125 miles. We're going to probably stop off in Forest Gate where she lived for a little while, because I'll do it in one hit, but I appreciate that people will probably have to do it in 2 hits, like 65 one day and 60 the next. And so that's what I want to do for charity, because that's my passion is I'm a bike rider, and so I can use my own passion to fuel some charity work, so.
And so what's interesting to me, I'm listening to, I'm not reading because I listen to audiobooks. I'm listening to Gabor Mate's book, Myth of Normal. Have you heard of that? It's just, Paul, it's like he says everything that is missing. He's a trauma specialist and he's talking about mental health, but he's talking about it in a way of our mental health services. Often doctors have, we have medicine available to us and rarely ask why. Why is this person dealing? Like, why are these symptoms here? Whatever the names are. And it is just beautiful. And it's like, for me, that's what's often missing is we're not dealing with the symptoms or the things that people are dealing with are normal based on whatever it is that's triggering them. It's like there's still for me in the mental health conversation, it's like there's something wrong rather than actually just going, that's freaking normal considering what you're dealing with. Like if Harry's dealing with wanting to be Zoe, there's a whole world there of like, that's real tough. So of course there's some outputs that get labeled, depression and whatever else.
Well, they medicated her, and they even tried to medicate me actually, because after she went, about 4 weeks after, I was having pains in my chest and my arms, and and it was an anxiety attack. That's all it was. But I didn't know that. My wife didn't know that, so she rang 111. They immediately called an ambulance, which then triggers a note to the doctor, and the doctor made an phone appointment, said, I think you should medicate yourself. I said, I don't want to medicate myself, I'm all right. Then I went to see the mental health nurse, and she's going, I think you should medicate yourself. So they push that agenda. They do push that agenda because it's easy for them. But here's the thing. It's funny because we're talking about this mental health issues. I've had mental health issues myself all my life because of my upbringing, and it's normalized. It's normalized in my life, And when Zoe first came out and she tried to commit suicide the first time, she tried to slash her wrists, and she told me afterwards she didn't have. She said, her words, I didn't have the bollocks to do it because it hurt too much, right? But she got so far and there was blood everywhere.
Oh,
and so that was her first cry for help. Oh dear, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I thought you was covering your head up.
No, I'm not. I'm putting a scarf on. I didn't light my fire this morning, which was a mistake. It's a bit chilly, so I'm just putting a scarf on.
So when I got the phone call and like to come, I think I was in Portland at the time. Come back, rushing back, and she wouldn't speak to me for ages because she didn't know how I was going to respond.
Yeah.
When she told me, "Look, Dad, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, and I want to be known as Zoe," and I just said, "Look, I don't care how you turn up. You're my kid, and that's the end of it." And I was doing a talk in London at the time, and I was at Green Park Station, tube station, and the train was coming in the station. And as it was coming in, I felt myself right on the edge and thought, "Oh," and I went, "What the fuck am I doing?" Anyway, so I'm a trained Samaritan. And I haven't practiced for probably about the best part of 20 years now, 15 years. And so I spoke to a couple of people in my close circle who went, "Oh, don't be what's the word they use? Selfish." I can't talk to them. There's no way I'm going to talk to them, because you can't say that to someone just because they've turned around and said, "I was going to step in front of a train." And then when I spoke to the Samaritans, I ring them. I knew they wouldn't judge me. They would let me talk through it, because being trained in as a Samaritan, I knew they just let me talk. And then once I talked it through, I realized what it was. I didn't want to feel the same pain as I did as a child. It was in that box. So for that split second, it will stop. Yeah. Because Zoe was the closest thing that would get to it. Because I had a reference point when I was a child. It can never be as bad as losing my mum. Right? Going back to what we were saying about earlier about, how do you make sense of it? It can never be as bad as that until Zoe went. And then when Zoe went, it was worse. It's one of your kids. So that's, I think there's a lot of things around. People don't understand what. Look, I was fortunate that I unpicked it and knew what it was. So when it happened, when Zoe did go, there were a couple of times I wouldn't ride my bike, because I was thinking I might be too close on the edge of just that. I have no intention of taking my own life, none whatsoever. But there were flitting thoughts, and people have them flitting thoughts and beat themselves up for having them and don't understand why they're having them. And I think that's a conversation we need to have and say that this is not normal. But if you've had a tough life, it can be understandable. That's the question. The key, understandable. When you understand something, it can be easier to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I had Amy on the podcast, and Amy and we were chefs together at Raymond Blanc's restaurant, and we'd done a lot of hard, long grafting hours, and we both shared, and it was really interesting because we've been friends for 20 years, and we actually on that podcast both went, I thought it'd be easier to crash the car than carry on going to work. And it was that like being so exhausted and the relentlessness of the work and not wanting to give it up and not knowing what to do otherwise, and just thinking, it'd just be easier. It'd be easier to be gone. That's the underlying thought, isn't it? It'd be easier to be gone.
Yeah, the pain will go away. The aggravation will go away. Whatever you're dealing with goes away. But and how did you cope with that at the time? What did you do at the time?
I had a few bouts while I was a chef of like real burnout, of just not being able to function, having to leave a job, go home, go back to my parents' house, which in and of itself was tricky because I'd left home at 15 and didn't really, that whole didn't want to go home, but actually had nowhere else to go type stuff. And I took some time off, and I would
basically that's what you did.
And then go do again, right? But each time I did it, I think there was definitely two. There might have been three occasions where I'd go to the doctor, exhausted. I couldn't hold it together. I'd be crying in the doctors, just going, "I'm so tired. I just need some time off." I knew what I needed, but of course, I was in a job, so needed to have effectively a sick note, right? To say I'm exhausted. Like, it wasn't enough for me to go, I'm fucking exhausted.
Mm.
And every time they try and put me on antidepressants. Similar story, right? It's like, oh, we'll give you a prescription. I was like, I don't need a prescription. I need sleep. I think I was lucky enough to sort of know that, I don't know, I've always been, my mum was a nurse. I'm a bit anti-pharmaceuticals. You know, my husband laughs because he's like, well, you took enough of them when you were young, you know, took a lot of drugs when I was young, but not the prescription kind.
That's different. That's self-medication.
Self-medication, right? Yeah, I did it with speed when I was a teenager, and then LSD and ecstasy as well. You know, I've done it all to escape. And there was it was almost like I didn't do drugs anymore. And I also knew that doing that wouldn't help, because I knew that although it is short term, it doesn't help. And I say, no, I don't want a prescription. I want sleep. And then there was a level to which by the time I was, I don't know, 22, I started in the whole personal development world and coaching and reading. So I had a level of support that was, you know, other than being offered drugs. But the doctor never once offered me therapy or coaching. You know, if I'd have sat with a therapist back then who'd unpicked, well, why do you work so hard? What are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to prove it to? All of the stuff I know the answers to this now, right? But it's like there was a missing in that, actually just having the conversations. Well, why are you burnt out? Why are you so exhausted? What is it? How are you creating this?
It's funny because I did a podcast myself about something that's a little tangent that comes off of that, which was I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and similar scenario. It wasn't a chef, but he was completely burnt out of work. I've got to go to work. I said, you haven't got to go to work. He said, I have. I've got to.
That's what we used to say. Unless we were dying, we had to go to work. And I mean literally dying, like in hospital.
So I said to him, okay, so what choice have you got then? He went, none. I said, sure? He said, yeah, I've got no choice. I've got to go to work. And the reason I've got to go to work, I'd lose my job, or I would, you know, if I lost my job, I wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. And so therefore I've got to go. And I said, well, actually, that is the choice. And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, if you can choose not to go, but you don't like the consequences of that choice. So when you realize that actually I don't want that consequence, so that I'm not going to take that choice, so I choose to go in rather than not go in, and you realize that you're doing it for a reason because you don't want the alternative, then that makes a difference to your attendance when you attend your work. And he went, I can sort of see it, and once he grasped it, he went in, and everybody's attitude changed towards him because he'd changed his attitude. He's not there anymore because he thinks he has to be. He has no choice. He's realizing he's making that choice to go in so he can pay the mortgage and take the kids to on holiday and buy them nice presents. He's there for that reason. The next choice is, do I want to be there or somewhere else? I.e., do I want to change my job? That's a different choice. Yeah, you've got that choice if you want it, but you don't have to look at it. I've got to do it. And if you actually look at the ones that really, really love the job they do, especially in chefing and in cooking, they're passionate. They work 20 hours a day, right? They're so driven because they really want to be there, as opposed to I like the idea of being there, but actually
don't want to be there.
Don't want to be there, because that was probably the choice that you was looking at. Is you didn't want to be there, but you did want to be there, but you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember vividly when we were at Raymond Blanc's and Manuel Katze's and it was when the working time directive came in, and HR were trying to tell us, who worked 80 to 90 hours a week, that we were only allowed to work 48, and we were outraged. We were like, you can't stop us doing what we love. And then the whole thing about signing out of the work time directive came in. So then we were all fine. We were like fucking queuing up to sign this form. Like, don't stop us getting our fix from our work addictions. I now know, looking back. But yeah, and I would say that's ultimately what I loved, what I did. And there was a whole work addiction thing wrapped up in it. I'd done drugs, I'd smoked, I drank. I think work being in kitchen saved me from drugs. I swapped one for the other.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I'm the same.
So I didn't need to take the drugs.
I didn't take the drugs, but I drank alcohol for. It was my way of probably escaping at the time, and you know, I've replaced it with biking. You know, I'll be bike now. And I do it to excessive. You know, I don't do things by halves. I never have done, and so when I remember when I first got involved in riding a bike. It was 2016, and I've always been reasonably fittish with gyms. I used to attend gyms, and I taught myself to swim. I remember taking my oldest daughter, Victoria, used to take her to swimming lessons, and I was watching how they were drilling it into her and getting her to you know, front crawl and bilateral breathing. So she breathed both sides, you know, left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I used to go swimming in the mornings, and I'd teach myself to swim properly because I couldn't swim properly. I'd swim like someone stuck me in the washing machine, you know. So I actually taught myself to swim really well. So I'd go and do sort of 50, 60 lengths of a morning before going to work. So I was reasonably fit.
Yeah.
But what was in the back of my mind all through that was I couldn't run. And when I was a kid, I used to run 100 yards, fall down on the floor, asthma attack, and I used to get picked on for it. And I think I mentioned earlier, I was the last one to be picked as a kid.
Yeah.
And I had this thing in my head that I wanted to overcome this running scenario. So I decided the easiest way, and I bought, this is weird, I bought a flat off plan. And I even though I trade properties through auction, I have diversified a few times, and we used to buy off plan when they first start a site, and you'd pick a plot and say, right, that's going to be a lovely flat because it's overlooking the rest of the buildings, and it's going to be peekabooing up the river and all that sort of stuff. So you pick your unit early so you'd get a decent price, and by the time they'd gone through building it, they were probably 20-30 grand more in 9 or 10 months' time. We bought this flat on Rochester Esplanade, and they gave you a free bike, right? And this bike was, honestly, it was a pile of shit. I mean, it was 200 quid, right? And anyway, so I picked this bike up. And I thought, I'll use that bike and have a little knockabout. It was so I let a little knockabout on the bike and didn't think anything about riding it and whether it's any good or not. I just jump on it and ride it. So I had a bike and I could swim, and I thought, I'm going to put myself in for a triathlon. And then and I remember I didn't do a sprint. I went for Olympic distance. So you're talking about a 1.5 mile swim, a 40k bike ride, and a 10k run. Didn't think anything of it. Thought I'd be all right, and nearly killed myself trying to do it. But realised I was actually quite good at the biking scenario. Right?
Yeah.
I thought I was a good swimmer until I went to a triathlon club and realised that I was a good swimmer, but I wasn't a good swimmer. If that makes sense.
Yeah. In that setting.
But I was really good on a bike, and so that started a journey off for me on typical me. I'm not going to do it by halves. I don't do things by halves. So I now go and buy myself a decent bike, which was £1,500. Rode around that for a while, and I actually used that for the triathlon. And then thought, actually, and I was looking into the sport generally, and the more you go down that rabbit hole, the more you realise, I can't have that bike because it hasn't got this on it, hasn't got that on it, and the wheels aren't as good. And before you know it, I'm buying bikes like they're going out of fashion. So now I've got 4 bikes.
Yeah.
One's on an indoor trainer indoors, which was an older bike, which I used I bought it on eBay, a piece of crap, the bike, not the trainer. And I rebuilt it from scratch so I could teach myself bike maintenance.
Wow.
I had my phone in the garage. I had this crappy old bike that was lots of components needed to be changed. Watched a load of YouTube videos and taught myself how to do bike maintenance. And now I can strip a bike down in 20 minutes, and then re-put it back together again in no time. And so I've got a bike from a trainer. I've got what they call a gravel bike, which goes off-road. So we go with a gravel bike. I've got a winter bike, which, I go, if it's raining, I go out on the wind, with the mud guards on it. And I've got my passionate speed machine that I take out on summer days and when I want to go really fast. And so I've replaced my drinking days with exercise, which is bizarre, really, because so now I'm avid bike rider.
It's massive, though, isn't it? I mean, it's like there's just a whole world of we can get the same.
Can we pause this video, or does it have to continue live? Or
we're live, but we can go. We can mute and go off video and then come back again.
I just need to go to the restroom quickly.
Yes, absolutely, no problem at all. All we do is we'll go remove like this. And we're back. That's the thing with log pod. No, it's fine. I was like, yes, what a great idea. I'm going to go too. It's the only downside of the Joe Rogan style podcast that goes on for a couple of hours is, it needs restroom breaks.
Yes. So I've replaced my my addictions with exercise. So that's because I don't drink at all now, at all.
Yeah.
I'm teetotal for 17 years now.
Yeah.
But I think if you have got a tendency to be taking things to the limit, if we're trying to change the way we feel, you're better off doing it in a positive way rather than a negative way, because it's easy to go down the alcohol route, and a lot of people are nowadays probably grabbing a beer after work or a glass of wine or something like that, and it becomes a bit of a habit, and before you know it, they're doing it too often. But
and on such a normalized scale, coffee in the morning to wake up, sugar in tea and coffee all day, alcohol at the end of the night. But it's legal and it's normal, so it must be okay. But actually, that is a massive pacifier through the day of caffeine to wake up, sugar to feel okay to do whatever we're doing, alcohol at night to sort of calm down or let go of the day. And it's huge. I mean, it's huge, absolutely huge. I mean, I'm not teetotal, but I rarely drink once a month, and I'm at a glass of wine. It's now and again I think, I fancy a glass of wine if I'm cooking steak type thing, but certainly not how I used to. I used to drink all the time, every night after work. And it was normal in catering as well. We'd all go to the pub.
Yeah. The estate agency was like that, very much like that. It was a drinking culture in the 1980s. You'd have a good day and go down the pub. Have a bad day, you go down the pub.
Go down the pub. Celebrating, go down the pub.
So it's a little bit of social conditioning in a way, because that's what people do. And the thing is that since the 1980s, the laws have changed, and it's you can go at home now, buy a bottle of JD, and instead of getting a little tiny measure, you can pour yourself a decent measure. And people are drinking more now than they ever have done. So different world. But
and I think it also speaks to how people are feeling. It's like, because actually, if I look at what I do, I think the interesting switch in addictions that's certainly happened to me, and it sounds like it's happened for you, is I can't remember the lady's name. She's written a book about addiction, and with things like drinking, smoking, sugar, alcohol, harder drugs, whatever, we get the high first and then we get the low. Whereas when you go cycling, there's a level to which you got to do the hard first to get the euphoria of the I've done it.
Yes, that's funny, I'm an NLP practitioner, and I learned some really great techniques in NLP. And when I was doing my indoor training for my rides outside, I would link pleasurable things to doing really hard sessions. And the great thing about indoor trainers nowadays, they're smart, so they link up to all your devices, and you can watch a video of a bike race, and it's affecting the power numbers on your indoor trainer, and affects the resistance and stuff like that. So I don't even have to think about what I need to do except pedal and just keep to the numbers on the screen. And so when there's a really hard mountain to climb on this app, I'm linking in my head pleasurable experiences. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Pleasurable experiences to riding up that hill. Now, my mates, they see, we went to the Alps last year. A friend of mine's got a ski chalet in the Alps.
Yeah.
And we went in the summer, and we were doing routes that the Tour de France would go through. Real hard climbs, like 14 kilometers of going uphill at 8%, and it's brutal. Yeah. And my mates are suffering. They're really suffering, and I'm going up there like there's no tomorrow. I'm linked up to pleasurable things, to getting pains in my legs going up these mountains. So you can trick your brain, if you want to, into getting pleasurable experiences from things that aren't pleasurable or aren't as good for you up the front end and they are in the back end. So, because I've linked up, I look at alcohol, and this is the way I see it, and this is only my view. This is not
an opinion of how it is. It's how you've come away from it, right?
And I looked at it, I wouldn't say to you, do you fancy going and doing a bit of heroin? Do you go out and get absolutely smashed on heroin? You go, no, I don't do that. That's ridiculous.
What's wrong with you, sir?
Get absolutely smashed. No. Well, heroin's doing the same thing as alcohol. It's biochemical change in your body. And it releases. You're chasing the same thing. The difference is your what's the word I'm looking for? Your threshold is different to this person who fancies doing heroin, because they don't give a shit. They're down there because their threshold is there. A normal drinker's threshold will be here. Although I should say the threshold is up. And I don't want to. So I linked it up to heroin. And so I wouldn't do heroin, so I don't do alcohol. And that's how I did it. Simple as that. Because I'm a great believer in controlling your brain rather than the brain controlling me. And if you don't take control of what's inside between your ears, an advertiser will, or social media will, or something else will control you. We are bombarded every day with subliminal messages from advertisers or from governments or from wherever it is. They're all
partners, right? That even if you
bring
it right down to within your home, partners. And this whole story about I used to have a story that I was controlled by people. It was like, no, I wasn't. I set it all up. used to say, yeah, whatever you think, and yeah, I'll do whatever you want, and then I used to go, oh my god, I'm being controlled. It's like, no,
you allowed it.
Like set it up. Volunteering. I love the saying volunteering for things instead of being a victim. And there's a separate conversation of victims who something's happened to them that was far outside of their control and all the rest of it. But that, like what I used to do in intimate relationships, I was showing up all the time, volunteering, going, I'll suck that up. It's like it's just that knowing. And I think if people are listening to this and they get that there's always a choice. I love that, what you said earlier.
Everything's a choice. Everything is a choice. Everything. It comes down to decisions you're making on a daily basis, right? So what's it going to mean? What you're going to get from it. Is it going to be a good thing or a bad thing? We're evaluating everything every day, and then it comes down to what's the choice I'm going to make, what's the decision, and what the choice is. And if you understand that, your life will become so much easier, because then you do what you want, not how you're controlled. And also you can this is another way of looking at things. That I don't suffer with this, right? I don't mind what you think of me. That's your business, right? And I look at it this way. There's a guy called Wayne Dyer. Have you ever read Wayne Dyer stuff? Oh,
I haven't read his stuff. I know you're talking about that. Yeah,
read his stuff. You will get a lot from it. And he talks about opinions. People got opinions. I've got an opinion about you. You've got an opinion about me. And you hear it regularly. Someone's especially on social media. Someone gives their opinion, and what does that mean? And people go into this panic mode. And and the first time I ever saw a review of my book, I wrote a book years ago, and the first time I saw a negative review, I remembered Wayne Dyer, because I went, what the fuck? I stopped myself. I thought, no, that's just her opinion. That's all it is. If someone sees her opinion and is taken with it, then fine, it's not a problem. It's just her opinion. Because the next person turned around and said how wonderful the book was. I mean, there were two polarizing opinions, right?
Yeah.
And this is the way I look at opinions. So if I give you a gift and you don't want that gift, and you say, no, Paul, thank you very much, I don't want that gift, who does the gift belong to?
It still belongs to them.
Yeah, it belongs to me, doesn't it? I bought it for you. You don't want it, so it's mine.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So if I give you my opinion, and I say, this is
what
I think, actually.
That is brilliant.
And you say, what do you mean? As soon as you say that, you've accepted it.
You've accepted it.
If you go, thanks ever so much, Paul, that's your opinion, and you've got the right to your opinion, but I'm okay with that, then you don't own it. You don't own it. If they own it.
Brilliant. Love that.
Along with life, worrying about what other people think, or they're worried about. I remember speaking to my wife's best friend. She's passed away now, but we was in Gibraltar, and we was having this conversation about, I don't mind what people think. It doesn't worry me. I don't get embarrassed about stuff. She went, yeah, you do. I went, I don't. And I was going to buy a watch in Gibraltar. And as I'm there, there was this big old shop front, and it had two window panes going into a door in the middle. So, and there was a step here, and I tripped up the step, hit the window with my hand. The glass vibrated and really loudly, right? I went, oh shit, right? And I hit the glass. I thought, I was worried about going through the glass. Anyway, I didn't go through the glass. And I carried on as I sort of brushed into the door and went through into the door. They were watching me. I wonder if you can help me. And I started talking about getting this watch. And everyone's laughing around me, right? And I've taken no notice to anybody. And she went, you didn't look round. I went, no, I don't. It doesn't worry me what happens, because if you was carrying a couple of bottles and you fell over and these bottles smashed really loudly, what's the first thing that most people do?
Look around.
Really embarrassed, aren't they? They're really embarrassed. I'd be checking to see if any of the bottles were survivable, because the shopping's been broken, right? Not what other people are thinking, or other people's, laughing at me, because the biggest fear that people have is being ridiculed or being ostracized. Think about that. They don't like to be separated, and they don't like to be ridiculed. They don't like to be, judged, or whereas it doesn't worry me at all. That's their opinion. It's, if they want to laugh, they can laugh. So what? And I don't mind, because of my experiences as a youngster. I don't mind being ostracized. I don't mind being and if you look at any leader, look at any of the big leaders in the world, leaders, company MDs or CEOs, any of them you think about that are super successful, none of them worry about other people's opinions. They're not going to be sitting there worried about, oh, they're going to think this of me, or they're going to think that. And they're usually prepared to stand alone with their own views, and people follow them. They don't follow others. And that's an important part, especially in this game.
Yeah.
Because I think this game, people are wrapped up in what, I can't do that. What people think.
And it's stifling, right? Because actually you're free. If you're not worried about what people think, you're free. You can do whatever you want. You can be fully self-expressed and with no like, oh my God. And it's so, we see it everywhere. I see it when people are with their children, because I think there's a level to which I'm kind of auditing now as you're saying that. I'm like, in the main, I'm pretty okay with it. I'd say, if anything, I'm one of the, and it's still a coping mechanism, right? But I'm one of the kids that I do dumb stuff on purpose. Do you know what I mean? So, which is a whole nother, that's a whole nother ball game, right? But it's like, I can be with awkwardness and all of that. But I see it in parents in the supermarket when their kids are maybe crying or something, and they're more worried about what people think about their kid crying than dealing with the kid. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's like, be with your child. It's okay. Like, fuck me. There's not a person on this planet that hasn't dealt with an upset child. There's no perfect parent and that don't get upset.
It's about, to me, it's about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. So if you think about, I used to do stupid shit when I was a kid, like stand out like I saw something. I'd do something really, really, really stupid to get a laugh or to get someone's attention. I'm okay with that. I don't mind if they think I'm a dickhead or whatever they think. But I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, and it's not many people can handle that. But that's a sign of success. It's you've got to be in that space. So I've opened a business once, and the guy I opened a business with, I put the money up, and he was going to run it. It was an estate agent, and he phoned me up after about 6 weeks of opening, saying we've opened in the wrong place. So I went, what? You've come to me to open this business. You told me you were going to run it. You knew what you was doing, and now you're telling me we've opened in the wrong place. He went, yeah, no one's coming in. The phone's not ringing. There's nothing's going on. I said, make the phone ring. He said, well, how am I going to do that? I said, it's easy. I said, surely you've convinced me. You've convinced me to invest in this business, and and now you're telling me that you're not qualified to do the job. No, but and he was used to working in an office that was established, and people were coming in and people were doing business. And I said, well, we got to make the phone ring. I said, look, write 100 cards out, get your business cards, right? Please call me urgently, right on the back of them, and I'll come pick you up in an hour. So I picked him up, and we got in the car, and he's going, what are we going to do? I said, drop these cards in that for sale board, that for sale board, that sold board, that net board. He said, oh, but someone might see us. I said, so? Drop the card through the door. And he was worried about what people were going to think. What are we going to say when they ring up? I said, well, we'll just come up with a little script. Don't worry about it. Just get the phone ringing. This is how you get the phone ringing. Anyway, so we did this, and the time we got back to the office, the phone was ringing off the hook. And he's going, what am I going to say to him? I can't believe it's going to be so embarrassing. I said, what's embarrassing? You told me you was out in the wrong place. The phone wasn't ringing. I've got you the phone ringing. Right? That's how you get the phone ringing. I said, think about it for a second. What can you say? What could you possibly say to these people? Because I wanted him to think outside the box. I wanted him to be totally uncomfortable in that scenario. Because you've got to be able to think on your feet in business. And he's gone to me, I don't know what to say. So I said, well, perhaps you should turn around and say, look, I've noticed your property's on the market, but you're not on our mailing list. He said, well, that's not urgent. I said, well, I'm not worried about what they think about whether the call is urgent or not. You might get some abuse from someone, but usually when you start talking, they'll forget why they've rung in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so after about 6 weeks, we've been open. We've been doing this weekly. Every single week, I used to make him do it. Come on, we're going out dropping cards today.
Awesome.
We had people ringing up saying, "Oh, you're persistent, aren't you? Well, what's that? This is the 4th week in a row you've dropped a card from my door. My agent's been telling me that they've been having viewings for me, and I know they're lying to me because they would have picked your card up off the floor otherwise. Why don't you come down and see my property?" Right? That wasn't even a call me urgent. She didn't say, what's urgent about it? She says, you're persistent. So we got so much business out of that. And then when he opened the next branch, he was comfortable being uncomfortable. He would go out and knock on the doors this time round and say, excuse me, I noticed your house is on the market.
Yeah.
You're not on our mailing list, right? And then he'd talk about their house and how to get that on the market. So it's a skill that can be practiced. I got a client. I used to do training for property investors, teaching what I used to do. I don't do it anymore. And one of the reasons was what I went through with Zoe, and so I couldn't commit the time to it. Yeah. But I had this woman who wanted to come on the course, and I was looking at, she was quite timid, and I thought, I don't want to take her money because that would be wrong. I said, look, I need you to see if you have got what it takes to do this. I've got it what it takes. I said, well, okay, I'm going to give you the pizza walk. This is called a pizza walk. I don't know why it's called a pizza walk. It was taught to me, but I used McDonald's rather than Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
And I asked her to go into McDonald's in these days when they had counters, not the self-service counters. And walk into McDonald's on a busy Saturday afternoon with a pair of shoes in her hand. Walk up to the counter when there's people being served and say loudly to the assistant, "Can you sol and heal these for me, please?" She went, "Really?" Oh, yeah.
I love it.
She'd walk up to the McDonald's. She did it. She walked up to McDonald's counter and she said, "Can you sol and heal these for me, please?" And the woman went, 1 second. So she went and got the manager. She didn't know what to say, right? And the people next to her started looking at her. And then, can I have make that large fries? Yeah. And they carried on their business, right?
Yeah.
The manager came out and said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Can you sol and heal these for me, please?" So she said it a second time, right? Again, the next customer next to us looked at her, carried on, a milkshake and all that, carried on their business. And he went to her, "No, but I can offer you a value meal for whatever it was." So she went, "Yeah, I'll have a quarter pounder with cheese, please." Yeah, and she went down and sat down at the table, watched the people that had watched her, didn't give her a second look, and she sat there, ate a quarter pounder with cheese, picked her shoes up. She said it was the most exhilarating thing she's ever done. And I thought, well, for that, you can come on the call.
You're in.
If you can do that, if you can be that comfortable being that uncomfortable, then you're going to go far. You're going to go far because you've got something in there that most people wouldn't even contemplate doing because of the embarrassment of doing it.
Yeah.
And we fear about what other people are going to think, aren't we? We do. We're what are they going to think of me? What are they going to? Oh, no, I don't want to get. That's their business. It's their gift. If they want to give it to you, you don't have to take it. You don't have to. And I grew up like that, so I'm sort of like, I call it bulletproof. I'm bulletproof.
Yeah, my game is being unfuckable with. It's the
Oh,
same
yes,
thing.
that's a good one.
Like,
Yeah.
be unfuckable with and be just unoffendable and unfuckable with. That's my game in life. And that's my game for my clients as well. I'm like, if you can be that, you can be anything. Because actually, you know, and you've just given me some brilliant ideas of things to do with people doing that. So thank you for that, like sharing that story, because it's reminding me of a book, and I can't remember the title of the book, but at the end of every chapter, there was doing things like that, and I did it, and it was like, and it's the same thing. So there was things like you'd go into a busy shopping street and you'd just look up, and you just stand there looking up, and if you wanted to like make it faster, you'd point and just look up and just see what happened, right? Or you'd be in, I can't remember the exact detail, but you'd be in a lift and you'd say something, or you know, all of that. And at the end of every chapter, there was an exercise to do.
Flexing that muscle. Say flexing that muscle. Yeah,
flexing that muscle. And I'm a fucker for doing the exercises.
It's another one I practiced. It's another one is people don't think about this. Is to say hello to every single person you come across.
Yeah.
Just look at me like, hello, morning, afternoon, whatever. Just say, get used to talking to people that you have no idea who they are. All right, you're completely oblivious. Some people won't even respond. Some people will. It's just, again, it's flexing that muscle of because to start with, it'll feel a bit weird saying hello to everybody you come across in the street.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? And it's just that it's kind of reminding me of when people are going, oh, you know, whether it's property deals or getting clients or building their business or selling something, it's like that's the source of all of it that stops people, isn't it? That being unprepared and unwilling to feel uncomfortable, to ask for the sale, to knock on the door, to put a card through the door. And then, you know, like you said, the guy said, fuck, but what if the phone rings? What am I going to say? It's like, well, you wanted the phone to bloody ring. You told me the phone wasn't ringing, and now you're telling me you don't know what to
do. I did say to him, don't ever tell me ever again you've opened in the wrong place, because there's no such thing. And it's funny because I had an idea many years ago that you could have one single office and have a massive patch, and Purple Bricks taught us that this could work. And I had this business model in my head. I didn't pursue it because I couldn't be bothered, because it was just too much aggro at the time. But you don't need. And I remember we had a load of numbers from the phone system: 312, 313, 314, 315, 316, 317. And I used to put an area next to each phone number. I used to get people ringing down the numbers on each area. It went to the same place, but people thought you were bigger than you were. And it's little things like that I haven't got a problem doing, because somebody will work it out and go, well, they haven't got all them branches. But
doesn't matter, does it? Like, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? And that's part of my my shield, I suppose. It's I'm not worried about what you think. I used to say I don't care what you think. I don't use that word anymore. I don't mind what you think, because caring sounds like it's like a.
It's not quite right, is it? When someone says I don't care, like when someone says to me I don't care, I'm like, I don't believe you.
It's actually not. I don't care. It's like, I'm not worried about it. It's like that's your opinion. Because if I say I don't care, it would indicate that I possibly do. So, and also it can be offensive to someone. What do you mean you don't care?
Yes.
So I've changed the language there, because language is really powerful, very powerful. And when I talk to people, especially in business, I never use I or me. I always use them. I say you or your. So a classic example would be I'd ring an agent up. I'm looking to look at a house, and instead of saying I don't want to waste my time, I'd say I don't want to waste your time. It's a different dynamic, all right? Because as soon as you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you feel valued. The other person feels valued. They don't feel, because if you appreciate their position, it can make a difference between them putting my offer forward in a good light than somebody else's, because this business, as I mentioned earlier, it's nothing about property. It's about people. It's understanding people.
Yeah.
and we can get so much further if we understand what it's like for that person that we're dealing with. And I've got this saying that people are stuck in I mode, right? They're in I mode all the time. It's about me. They're oblivious. I said to you before when we was off camera, as a bike rider, you know, and I see cyclists like this everywhere. As a bike rider, it's my it's about understanding that I've got to get out their way. I haven't got to get out my way because I'm the squidgy one. But I've got to appreciate that they're on the road and they're frustrated. I'm going slower than them. They want to overtake me. They want to get around me. So I'll find somewhere so they can go over. I see two cyclists riding together side by side, oblivious to everything around them. And we are very much like that as a species nowadays. Is we have got that self-preservation, but we haven't got the threats we had when we were roaming around with saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah,
we haven't got that threat of losing our lives. So it's very much a different world, and we still see the world as threats when they're not really threats. But if we were just to be a bit more less oblivious and more conscious of and considerate of other people. You see people walking around on their phone. They're completely oblivious to anyone that's walking around and bumping into people, and you know, it's a different world that we live in today.
And it's a paradox, right? Because actually, when we take care of other people and we're aware of other people, we get taken care of. Because if we look after others, they look after us. I love that you say it's all about people, because I say this to clients, and you know, when I'm speaking and stuff, I'm like, it's about your relationships, it's about people. And if you don't want to deal with people, your business is going to be a fucking shit show, because you're gonna, you know, like say property deals, Jesus, you know, estate agents, solicitors, surveyors, tenants, landlord. I mean, it's endless. And even with the way you're doing it, where you're not buying and holding, it's still a people business, right? You've got to deal with, you know.
What's the key to my business is housing stock. So I've got to get in there, get it for the right price. And if I don't get it for the right price, I'm going to potentially lose money. So I haven't got the luxury of time. So if you make a mistake as a landlord and you keep it for 10 years, you've got that luxury of time. I haven't got that luxury. So I look at it this way: is if I go and see a vendor direct, the first words out my mouth would be, I'm here today because I'm looking to make a profit, whether it's now or in the future. Is that okay with you? Now, what I'm doing straight away is I'm being brutally honest up front. Because when I go in to see a vendor and say, and I don't say that, and I go, okay, Mrs. Vendor, and I see this so many times in our industry, especially if they're dealing with vendors direct. They're going, well, we're looking for a win-win situation here. You know, we can do this for you, Mrs. Vendor. We can do that for you. And we can do this for you. We can do that for you. But in the back of that vendor's mind, they're thinking, yeah, but what's in it for you?
What's your win?
What's your agenda, right? So if I get that agenda out of the way right at the beginning, what does that do straight away, immediately?
Oh, massive trust. They know you're going to be straight with them. Because if you say that, which is the thing that no one else says, they're like, oh, this guy's going to tell me the truth. They're going to be really straight about everything.
And the next words out of my mouth, so tell me what the situation is. I might have had a conversation before, but I want to reconfirm it. And then what I do is I say that, keep this shut, and use these, right? And again, it comes down to, and I'm going to give this tip. So your listeners, there is a fine line between manipulation and influence. So we've got to do this with the right agenda in mind, right? Understand that we're not trying to rob someone or rip them off, so I'd ask them the question of what's the situation. I'd listen intently to listen to their language patterns, to listen to their metaphors they come out with. They might say their back's against the wall, or they're in trouble, or they might use a phrase that I would repeat back to them. And once they've told me the situation, then I say, so I can clarify this. The situation is, you said your back's against the wall and you're in trouble, and so they go, oh yeah, and they feel heard.
Yeah,
because
you actually
their language.
In their language, yeah.
In their language, yeah. And how many times have you ever come across someone, and this will happen about a third of the people that you meet, right? You'll come across somebody, one in every 3 people, and you go, they talk my language, because they've got similar language patterns to you. You've not thought about it. You just talk in similar language patterns, and you get on really well. And you think, oh yeah, we're just like. It was just like, well, if you know what it is that gives you that link with somebody else, it's powerful stuff. Trust me, it's powerful stuff. So I repeat back to them what they've told me, and then I do something completely bizarre. And your listeners might be thinking, he's mad. He's mad. What's he doing that for? I'll give them an alternative. I say, have you considered doing this? Have you considered doing that? If you did this, this would happen. So say they were getting repossessed. So you realize if you speak to your lender, you've got less chance of being repossessed, because today it's difficult for them to repossess you. So usually people bury their heads in the sand. They ignore it. But actually, you're better off not getting repossessed. Or if you do get repossessed, you're actually going to get more money than you will from me, because the lender will get top dollar for it, whereas I will pay you a lot less. So I'll tell them that if they go to an estate agent, or if they perhaps sold it in auction, because that's what I'm potentially going to do. And I'm brutally honest with them that there is a solution to this. But the difference is, because I've done the job properly, they want to sell to me because they trust me. And have you ever heard that saying, you've got to build rapport?
Yeah.
I think rapport is the prerequisite to every communication. So the waiter should have rapport with the person in the restaurant, and the person in the restaurant should have rapport with their waiter. So rapport is the prerequisite to all communication. What's deeper than that? What's deeper? I want to build a bond, not rapport. Rapport is just what we should have, right? But if you build a bond, what's a bond built with?
Connection, shared
trust.
Yeah, trust. Yeah,
we've built that trust right up from the beginning, and then I'll turn around and say, look, I'd love to buy your house, but I'm so far away, it's an insult. Because I would have had the price of what they think, or because if I've done the job properly up until that point, I know the situation. And they'll do one of two things. One, if they're not going to sell me the house at the price I want, they'll probably go, I'm not looking to be insulted today, but thank you very much, or something of that nature. Or, you know, okay, thanks ever so much for being honest. But if they say to me, what's an insult, I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell them what I can do. Then that's when I bring it in. I can do this. And because now they're open to listening to what I'm going to do for them. I'm not going to tell them at the front end. I'm going to tell them the most important part, which is when they're going to make that decision. And then I'll give them a figure, and I won't say a word for about 20, 30 seconds. I'm not one of these that the first speaks loses, because I don't believe in that, because that's manipulation again. If I'm negotiating with a car trader, yes.
Well, and it's that so many people are uncomfortable with silence. It's actually giving people a chance to bloody think. Whereas so many people are uncomfortable with silence that they will try and fill the gap and talk. Whereas actually at that point, people need us to shut the fuck up so they can think, so they can go, right, what am I dealing with here?
And that's my point, is that I will leave that moment, but I don't want to make them feel awkward. Yeah. So I'll then say to them that I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it if you want time, and I'll take their number. If I've got their number. And then I'll leave it with them for a few hours, and usually within a couple of hours they've come back to me. But you make a very, very valid point about silence. I'm really happy with silences. Yeah. In fact, when I do a talk, if you ever see me talk on stage, I'll walk up on stage and I'll give myself 5 seconds to say nothing.
It's the quickest way to quieten the room, doing that, hey? Because everyone's like,
What's going on? He's forgotten what he's going to say.
I used to do that in BNI when I went in BNI, the networking meeting. You know, you stand up, you do 6 seconds, and I used to stand up and say nothing. And that 5 seconds to people is, you can almost feel it in the room, can't you? It's excruciating. People are like, wow.
But it slows you down as well, because what happens is it gives you time to think and gather your thoughts. I look at all people's eyes.
Take a breath and just.
And then I'll smile at them.
Yeah, and actually it connects back, doesn't it, to being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and actually being comfortable in that, it's huge.
I love looking around the room and then going, okay, so let me tell you why I'm here today, or whatever the spiel will be. But it's powerful. I was with a young lad I was trying to teach years and years ago to do what I do, which is go and have a look at a house. And he said to me, intently watching what I was doing, great student. And I used to ask him what he's learned today, what did he get from it, and I'd tell him the reason why I did certain things. And we came out of one viewing, and he went, "You don't say much, do you?" I went, "No." He said, "But when you do something, say something, it's really impactful." And I said, "Yeah." And that's important in what we do for a living, especially if we're trying to acquire a property at a good price. It's really important that you hit the nail on the head. I go around watching people view houses, and they can't help but gap fill. And they'll be chatting. And what that does, it gives a sort of unnerving feeling to the agent that these people aren't 100%. Someone comes in, doesn't say much. What they say is impactful. And then they go and do what they say they're going to do rather than talk about it, because talk is
that's
cheap.
such a big one. Oh my gosh. If I could bottle that, like doing what you say you're going to do. If people just did that for the rest of their lives, whether it be turning up at the time they said they're going to turn up, or doing that thing that they said they were going to do, life-changing.
And I remember walking into a property over in Folkestone, cracking flat. It was on for like 150 grand. I want to buy it for 110. So it's 40 grand off. It's had numerous buyers. They all fell out of bed for different reasons. Most of them were to do with condition of property. He's telling me that his client's never going to take a penny less than 135 grand, because he'd had 135 accepted before. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do some numbers. I'll give you an offer this afternoon. I sat in the car, wrote an email, copied my solicitor in, asked her to confirm our position. So so the time he got back to the office, he had an offer, explanation of the offer, and a solicitor's letter backing it up saying he's got the money, we're ready to go, get us a contract. What does that agent now think?
Well, you're solid, because you even over-delivered.
Yeah. And then he said to me, they won't take 110. And I said, well, we've got nothing to lose but to try. But you now know we're in a position to move. And so when he back to his client said, look, I've had an offer of 110,000. I know you're not probably going to accept it, but the guy's proved he's got his money and he's ready to go. That was the thing that tipped it over the edge, and he come back to me and said, I can't believe it. I said, yes. But he had faith in what we could do, and that faith is all I ask for. Really, is they've got faith in me to do the deal. Then I'm probably going to be the one that's favourable to them when there's lots of people interested.
And again, you're not worried about what people think, because so many people said to me before, I can't offer that. I might upset them. I'm like, but that's the truth of what you can offer. So either do it or don't. Like, just put it in. What's the worst that could happen? They tell you to fuck off.
It's interesting. I taught my oldest daughter. We went to buy her a Mini for the Mini dealership, and I pulled a flanker on him, because the great thing about nowadays when you buy a car, you can get your phone out and you can go onto some website and there's loads of cars for sale. So he said to me, "This car's a top-notch one. It's got all this on it. It's all this, so many features in it." And my daughter was excited about the features, but didn't need them. And it was about 2,000 quid over what she wanted to pay. And it was 12 and a half grand, I think it was. And so I said to him, look, there's loads on here. Look, I can't believe you're charging that much. And what I failed to tell him was that they weren't the same spec. He didn't check, right? And I said, same colours. I just said to him, it's the same spec. I just showed him quickly. And I bamboozled him. So with about 100 different things I was talking about at once, because there are times when you can confuse someone. And he didn't check what I was showing him, and he went off to his boss, come back, and I agreed it at 10,500 instead of 12,500.
Brilliant.
And Vicky's sitting there going, I can't believe you did that. And I said, did you learn a lesson? And she said, yeah. You know, if you don't ask, you don't get. And she's a really good negotiator, my daughter, very good negotiator. Been taught by one of the masters. So, but she loves haggling. She loves it absolutely, and I love haggling with traders. With estate agents. I love haggling with car dealers or any furniture suppliers. I love all that. Love it.
Yeah. And again, it's the enjoying it, isn't it? And it's the wanting to do it, and it's the.
Remember I told you that story about that flat I bought, the very first flat I bought. And I changed my life and said, that's it. I'm going to get a girlfriend back, get a flat, get a job. I remember buying a flat for that, a sofa for that flat. And the girlfriend was with me at the time. And as the salesman come over, and I went to him, how much is that? You having a laugh? And she went, oh, I'm so embarrassed. And she walked out. She went, and I got the sofa for half price, because it was one they were using it was a display model.
Yeah,
it was a lot cheaper than what it would normally have been anyway. But I got half the sticker price, half that they were asking. And when I came out, she went, "Are you satisfied?" I went, "Yeah, I've just bought that for £250 when they were asking 500 quid. So I'm well pleased." And she went, "Oh, I can't believe it." She used to really get embarrassed, and I can't see why the embarrassment's there. Really can't.
And it's such a non-tangible stopper. Like, it stops people, but it's not real. It's completely made up.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so that's where I come from anyway. So,
and you still do property now?
Yes.
I've got a funny echo back. Can you hear it?
No.
I can hear myself repeat it back. Oh, it's stopped now.
Is it?
Bizarre. Ghosts in the line. We started talking about before we came on, which I wanted to pick up on because that was really interesting. We were talking about the property market, what landlords are really up for, about the social side of housing. Let's go back there because it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I've got a very different view on one of the reasons why I don't own properties is because I've been homeless before. And you asked me the question of why homeless, and and the reason being is that I've experienced road landlords in the past, being in a situation where they were charging astronomical rents for. I couldn't afford it. It was ridiculous, the rent I was paying, and the landlord did suffer because we didn't. Every now and again we missed the payment because it was such a struggle for us. But I do think there is a social element to a social responsibility for the rental market. Now there is a big part of the rental market that's transient. So people would move from one area to another. They don't want to buy a house because they're not sure if they're going to stay in that area and they're going to like the job or not. And then they go to that area, they stay in a rented accommodation for a year, and then they go and buy a property. Or if they choose to stay in that rented accommodation rather than buying, then fine. But there's a part of the society, and it's usually the ones that can't get on the housing ladder or are in, especially now, if you think about this logically, right? I'll ask you this question. Let's start off with asking this question. Do you think there's going to be a housing crash?
So here's my answer to that is there's always ups and downs, and it's ultimately always up. So
what do you think the likelihood of crash being coming?
I don't know, because I think the demand and the supply is that it's going against what we normally say. So lots of people say there's a crash coming, and I'm going, well.
And the general census is there's a crash coming, right? There's a crash coming. And
Yeah,
I've got
most
a
people
very
like
different
crash
view.
coming, but then I would say I've been waiting for the crash for the last 7 years, and it's not coming, and things keep going up. Right?
I've not waited for a crash, but there is one coming.
Yes,
but
not like waiting to see one. I've never stopped buying because there may or may not be, but in the sense of this, like everyone's saying it's coming. Where is it?
So I'm going to give you a sort of like an outline of. In fact, you're probably going to nick some of my content that me and John Cox are going to do, because we're going to do a podcast on this subject.
Better off you guys could come and do it, because ironically in my coaching practice the least interesting subject for me is property now. I love people's purpose and what they're doing in their businesses, and the property stuff's less. Anyway,
you're going to like this, actually. You're going to love this, because this is going to give you an insight into what the mechanics behind it. So I get people talking about there's going to be a correction, there's going to be a crash, people can't afford it. Now, if you look at it logically from the data that was supplied, so people are saying it's 7 times income to buy a house nowadays. The national income, average income is £29,000. The average house is X, like 7 times income. It can't continue. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Makes sense, right? And the affordability is being stretched. We've got this cost of living crisis, and the mortgages are going up, and it's getting to a stage where it's going to pop. Everything looks like it's going to go bang, right? But I've got a slightly different opinion, and my opinion is that I don't think it will. I think there'll be a softening of prices, which there already has been, and I think that will just continue, and then it will chip up again. And the reason for that is, do you know what the average first-time buyer salary is? £42,000 a year. And that's nationwide. That's not London or South East. That's nationwide. That's information coming from LSL, the largest estate agency chain in the country. That's what they've worked out, right? So if the average first-time buyer salary is 42,000, and 2 of them buy together, you add them, times it by 4.5, and add a deposit, they can borrow well in excess of 400 grand, probably 450. So you've got until the average house gets to around the 450 mark, then there's no stretch of incomes, right? So on top of that, anyone that's taken a mortgage in the last 14 years has had stringent checks on them. We haven't had lax lending. So if you look at every crash we've had in the past, so 2008 was followed a period of lax lending, very, very irresponsible borrowing, irresponsible lending. Going back to 1989, 88, again, a period of very lax and loose lending, right? We haven't had that for 14 years. Anyone that's bought a house has got what I call skin in the game. They have been scrutinized, they've saved their money up, they've bought a property, they've got their own money invested, and they're on a repayment mortgage, not an interest only.
Yeah.
So if things go tight, they can go to the lender and say, got a problem. They go, well, go on interest only for 6 months until the cost of living crisis comes over, and then go back on to repayment. They've got that option, right? They didn't have that option before in 2008. So if we know that the average income is around £28,000, what happens to the average person who's average income? What are they doing?
Don't know.
They're renting. All right. So if they're your tenants, and they're being squeezed, all right, by the cost of living crisis, and they're on the lower end of the scale, what is the only credit agreement that goes on your credit file? The only credit agreement that doesn't go on your credit file and doesn't show up if you miss a payment?
It's your rent.
Rent. Only one, right? Yeah. So if you're in a position where you've got, you haven't got, as a landlord, you haven't got insurance, right? And you've got a tenant in there who's being squeezed, and they've got the choice of putting petrol in their car, putting heating on, giving food to their kids, paying their bank loans and credit cards, or paying their landlord. Which one's going to get chipped first?
Well, I have 2 opinions on this. One is, in theory, it's the landlord, and the second is, actually, if there's good relationships there, often it's not. So it's It's a double thing, isn't it?
Okay, so what's more likely
right?
if
It hurts
they're
them to miss the payment with the landlord.
So if you look at it generally, all the people who are in the first-time buyers and the mortgage people have been scrutinised. They've got flexibility in their affordability because they could go on interest only if necessary for a short period. And if you're a first-time buyer now, you're probably likely be living at home, saving every penny you can because you need a big deposit nowadays, right?
Yeah.
So you're both living in either one parent's house or you both live with your parents. Today you won't have any other debt, otherwise you wouldn't get the mortgage. So you need to be crystal. So you won't have the problems the cost of living crisis is giving people at the moment. So you're just sitting there waiting for the right house to come along before you buy it, right? So, but the person who's squeezed is the first time buyer who's already bought somewhere and they've been in there for say 2 years. They're coming up for their renewal of their mortgage as their fixed rate, and everything's gone up, right? Also, once you've been in the house a little while, does it matter if you get a bit more debt then? Doesn't really, does it? Because you'll probably go and need some new curtains. We'll go and put it on the credit card. We need some a new kitchen. We'll put that on the credit card. So they've got a bit of extra debt. The cost of living crisis is squeezing them, but they have got that flexibility to reduce it to interest only. But the problem is they now can't afford the next step. So they don't put that house on the market. So the first time buyer's waiting for something to come on, that's not coming on. So what you said about supply demand, supply is curtailed, but demand is still there.
Yeah, you can't have a crash when that's happening, right?
The only way it could crash, is if enough people had to sell at the same time.
Yeah.
But there is a paradox. And you remember I said that potentially that the tenants might chip the rent. Now you're talking about responsible landlords, and there's communication between the tenant and the landlord. That's great, but that doesn't often happen. Actually, in a pro rata, it's probably only 10% of the landlords are like that.
Yeah,
landlords are pushing their rents up because their mortgages have gone up. So they're charging more for that. So their tenants being squeezed. So their tenant starts chipping their price. Also, if you think about it logically, are landlords the darlings anymore for the lending world?
No.
I don't like them anymore, right? It's too risky. If you've got a lot of properties, they don't like it. So there's a lot of landlords are having a treble whammy, right? They're being taxed like there's no tomorrow, because 10 years ago you could write all your mortgage payments off against tax, right? You can't anymore. So you're having the taxation. On top of that, you've got regulation that's kicking in. So you can't just kick someone out, right? Like you used to be able to. The third thing is your mortgages have just gone up substantially. And if you're not a priority borrower anymore, you're not going to get sweet rates. So your rates are going to go perhaps from low 2s to high 5s, maybe even 6%. That's a big jump, right? Along with the fact that your tenants might start chipping the rental payments. Who's most vulnerable now?
Buy-to-let landlords.
Buy-to-let landlords. And you're going to find it's going to happen. I talked about this years ago when it's all right borrowing money and leveraging. There's a point at which that leverage becomes a problem if you're not paying it back, right? And that problem is coming to the front now. So we have a potential problem, but it's not going to affect the whole market. It's only going to affect pockets, and then pockets are going to be places like so where you are in Wales. So them little areas where you had loads of buy to landlords purchasing really cheap properties. They were having it off for a long while, weren't they? Renting them to DSS or renting them to wherever. And there's areas where they have just been bought by buy-to-let landlords. Them little pockets are vulnerable. You could well see prices fall in them, that type of 2 up, 2 down, little terraced miners' cottages in Wales, or where I live in the Medway towns, where, you know, the places where they're not so desirable, like Luton in Chatham, Kent, places like Dover, or places like perhaps certain parts of Gillingham. So where there's a big concentration of landlords that have purchased, they could be vulnerable. So we might see a chip down in prices in them particular areas. But what you're going to see now is lenders have got less people to lend to, because a lot of people have come out the market and sat on their hands. They will start lending lax lending in the future. They'll start giving 90. I've seen this advertised regularly recently online. First Direct advertising 95% mortgages. So we're going to start to see the 95% come back into play. You're going to start to see lenders go, do you know what? We'll give the old criteria a little bit of a softening, and we'll allow.
Well, and the length of time, you know, this length, you know, 30-year term, 35-year term, 40-year term, 45-year term. You get into
find ways to lend,
where they've got mortgages that can be handed down. There's many ways to skin a cat, isn't there, to make lending lax. It might not even be lax.
And I think it will be the government policy is they want to get people into generation buy, not generation rent. So they want to get people back into buying houses. So the government is going to start doing things with lenders to allow them. They've already told the FSA to be a bit less harsher on their criteria scenario with the lenders, because banks have never been in such a strong position. They've got lots of money to lend. And this next cycle, right, I don't know when it's going to start. It could start this year, it could start next year, will be another push, and there's another 20% to go on prices yet. And that's when the danger comes. Because when you start having lax lending and you have that little push and everyone's frightened to miss out and they start buying in like crazy, which could well happen in the next couple of years, then you'll have the crash, which will be loads of properties coming on the market at the same time, have to be sold, causes a crash. No other reason. So we've got some interesting times ahead. But the great thing is people still need somewhere to live.
Yeah, and always will.
Yep.
So I think what's interesting as well coming up for me is that I'm a buy and hold person. I always have been, right? I think I've sold, I don't know, 2 or 3 properties in my whole buying lifetime, you know, and I only offload if it's a real pain. So I offloaded a flat because it was part of I did a 4-bed holiday let and a 1-bed flat downstairs, lived in the 1-bed flat, moved out, crappy rental because it was such a nice flat and the rent just wasn't worth renting. Sold it. And basically pulled the money out of that deal and some, and still kept the upstairs. So, you know, it was worth selling, but rarely do I sell. And I think what's interesting to me is that all of these ups and downs don't affect me because I stay in. I'm all in. I've said to my tenants, getting echoes again. It's bizarre. I'm just going to switch my microphone. See if that makes a difference. Okay, try that. Nope, still getting it, which is going to be really crappy.
Try and turn the volume down on your speakers or something.
Let's try that.
No.
How strange.
Doesn't sound accurate here. Right.
No, I can just hear it repeated back to me, and it might not pick up on the recording actually because of the way that StreamYard do it. So props to StreamYard. Hopefully it won't. So because I buy and hold, all of these like, oh, it's a rise, it's a crash, or properties have done this, that, the other. I just keep going. You know, I buy all the time.
But the key here is that it's managing your debt. That's what you've got to think about longer term is managing your debt, because you know that borrowing costs are going up.
Yeah,
you know, taxation has gone up unless you've bought everything in a limited company. You're still
I bought in my own name, and what I had to do was put it into a limited company, and boy, did that cost me. I've only just started paying corporation tax now, 5 years on, because it whopped me. And because I wasn't doing this strategy of leverage, I actually had the equity to go, all right, I'm going to take the hit. It sucks. I don't really want to take that hit. I wasn't going to pull the cash out, but it was sat there as equity, and, you know, the leveraging was coming down just because the prices were going up.
But it's interesting. But how many people have been taught in the past, and I've heard it so many times, and I was warning people about it back in 2011, is that, you know, it's all right recycling your cash out and leaving nothing in. But there's going to be a point at which that gravy train stops, because house prices don't continue to rise and borrowing costs go up. It was waiting to happen.
Yeah.
But that's how people were taught. They were taught to recycle their cash out, and they want to pull every single penny out, and that's a dangerous game. But most of the landlords I know that are extremely wealthy have got lots of equity, and they're quite happy to pay their debts down. They pay them down.
That's what we're doing now. We're paying down at quite a fast rate. It's like pay down. For sure.
Yes, and I think people miss the point with leverage. Leverage is all right for growth.
Yeah,
but it's not a continuous strategy. You can't continue with it. It gets you going, and then it's about managing that afterwards. And people haven't got that sort of. I mean, when I finish, I said to you earlier, I'll end up with a block of flats, maybe 20 flats in the freehold, and I'll just give the keys to the council and say, right, how's homeless people in it? They'll have no borrowings on it. It'll be
that'll be your income.
It'll be an income. So and it'll be there for my kids, when they're older. When I've gone, but it'll be a quality block that will get looked after.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, isn't it, with housing, about, you know, how it's done, and what you were saying before about people profiting off it and not actually.
Yes, we didn't talk about this on this call, did we? Because we was talking about it before. So there is a social responsibility for tenants. I was homeless myself, so I've experienced it. So all the housing stock, social housing stock, was sold off in the 1980s, and in the 1980s, Maggie Thatcher also amended the Housing Act and also the Financial Services Act, and the buy-to-let was born, and that basically created the void which buy-to-let filled, because they were selling the council houses off but wasn't replacing them, and along come the private landlord, which was all great and dandy, and everything was going swimmingly. The problem is, you hear terms like return on investment, you hear cash flow and profit. But when you've got profit involved and you've got vulnerable tenants, they don't mix. And I've heard this quite a few times in the last 6 months. I'm having to put the rent up because my borrowing's gone up. Really? Is that fair? Well, I'm not going to lose money on my investment, right? So they put their rent up, right? And I asked the question straight away, will you put the rent down then when the mortgages go down? No. Well, then you're doing it for profit. That's all. The pound note is coming first before the welfare of the tenant. And I hear people talking about, I look after my tenants, but they talk in a different language when it comes to the asset and the management of that asset, which is, it's about cash flow, it's about profit, it's about money, and money becomes the objective, as opposed to if we bring over, whether it by private or whether private funding, or whether it's through government funding, the welfare of the tenants on the lowest level should be looked after with a social responsibility from the local authority. Otherwise, you've got people. The reason why the laws have been changed is because people were just kicking people out, and it is, and a lot of landlords don't understand this, right? It's the tenant's home. It's not your property; it's their home. They've made their home there. There was a landlord I know, so I'm giving them notice. I'm kicking them out, and it was like, well, no thought for their welfare whatsoever, and they'd been there 10 years, and now they've got upheave because someone decides they want it back. And any other country in the world you go to, tenants have got more rights than that. You've got the right to stay there for life and stuff like that. Whereas here you haven't, because the Housing Act was changed. I mean, Germany and France, it's not as easy to do buy-to-lets in them countries that is here. Very difficult, very difficult. And a friend of mine had Spanish properties, and he was letting them out, and his tenant got pregnant and he wanted it back and he couldn't get the house back because she was pregnant. Simple as that. No, you're right to stay there. Whereas over here, it's been easy just to throw someone out on the street. And that's why you've got that eviction, the revenge evictions that aren't allowed anymore. Someone starts complaining or becomes a bit of a pain in the arse, I get rid of them. And you may not do that, right? But there's a lot of landlords that do. A bigger percentage of landlords do than they don't. And this is the reason why regulations come in. And it's going to get tighter. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get tighter. And it should be as well. There should be a protection for that lowest part of society. The people on that, the most vulnerable people should be protected.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, I remember having conversations with my tenants and they didn't believe me. So when I hand them the keys, I say, look, it's my house, but it's your home. You live here as long as you want. This is a professional business. I don't sell, I hold. If you want to live here till you die, you can. It's up to you. And if you want to move on, I completely understand that. And there'll be someone else. And when all of the tax changes came in, I would say it was my tenants more than anything. There was also a self-preservation of actually, I don't want to let go everything that I've built up, right? I'm not, obviously that was there. But there was this promise that and we go back to, people doing what they say they're going to do, right? I'm very old-fashioned like that. I'm like, your word is everything to me.
Bond. It's your bond. Yeah.
Everything, yeah. And I was like, fuck, I got to do this because I've got 15 families who depend. And I have, 2-3 bed terraced houses in the valleys is my main makeup of my portfolio. And then I have a holiday let and a big HMO. And I was like, I got to suck this up and just carry on. I got to find a way. If nothing else, even if I said, fuck it, I'm done, I'm walking away, like a lot of landlords did. I was like, I can't, because where are they going to go? Because I'm going to have to evict them to sell. It's a very interesting, I think the place I'm getting to with the level of wealth that I've built up and Owen's built up, and it's small compared to what some landlords do. And what the point is that I'm getting to a place where I'm like, how do I make a difference? How do I take care of more people? The saying of build a bigger table and have more people for dinner. And I think what's really interesting to me is we can't expect the government to take care of everyone. And there are those of us that have enough wealth that can actually do our bit. And there's something for me in, I can do my bit in my property business, like everything you've just described. I'm like, yeah. And it's probably why things don't affect me. I tie in fixed rate for 10 years. I intend
sensible move now, isn't it?
And I had people telling me not to do it. I was like, you may be able to deal with that level of uncertainty. I'm going to fix it.
What rate was that, 10-year fixed?
4%, I think. It wasn't that low.
That's a good rate to fix at 10 years because we now know that could have cost you dearly now.
That's a lot of money, right? So it's like wherever I can, whatever the longest product is. I've got a Shawbrook product for a few houses that's 10 years. I think Aldermore was 5. I don't think they had a 10. And I got brokers going, no, I'll fix for 2, then do another. I'm like, no chance, mate.
Well, it's interesting because if we think about it logically, right, interest rates should never have stayed that low for so long.
It's crazy. It was
no need for it. There's no need for it. And now it's a shock to the system. But watch this, right? And I predicted this actually. I wrote about it in September last year. When that mini budget went off, everyone was saying, "Oh, it's going to be a problem." Blah, blah. And I went, "This is what's going to happen. It's going to be like hell for 6 months, really, because no one's going to know what's going on." But you watch lenders drop their rates next year because they pulled all the rates because they didn't know where the base rate was going to go because it could have gone 5 or 6%.
Yeah.
And so they pulled all the rates and then chucked a load of expensive rates on so they had something to sell. And then slowly but surely they're bringing the rates down and down and down and down and down. And I said, by February, March time, the rates will be a sensible level that people will be able to borrow against. And they're at that. And we're at that. We've already hit the top of the peak of the inflation cycle. We could have predicted this. I actually did a report in, I actually put it on social media in 2020. And I said there was going to be a boom of biblical proportions and it's going to cause inflation because it wasn't down to printing of money that was a problem. It was people were sitting at home. They weren't going to work. They were still getting paid. They didn't have their travel. They didn't go to restaurants. They didn't go to the cinema. They didn't go to a holiday. They didn't go and spend anything just frivolous. They just sat at home. So there was, over the lockdown periods, there was 250 billion pounds in accidental savings in that period. Now, that's people who don't normally save. They're not savers, they're spenders, right? Now, that's got to be spent, because it's not going to be saved for these because they're not natural savers. They're going to be spending, right? So if everyone's spending their money at the same time, along with a curtailed supply chain, so you didn't get, other countries were locked down a lot longer than we were. We were one of the first countries to come out the gates with a full vaccination program. We were ahead of the curve, but supply was curtailed because of supply chains. So there was so many people chasing very little stock out there, whether that would be cars, whether that be hi-fis, whether that, stereos, or not stereos, computers, or whether it be push bikes. I mean, my push bike I bought for 4,800 quid today at 6,200 quid. That shows you the difference, right? Yeah. And all manufacturers were saying, well, I don't need to discount now, so I'll just hold my nerve and get my full price. Caused inflation, massive inflation, along with us leaving the European Union and people going back to their own native countries. So we had a labour force issue, which was pushing up prices because fruit wasn't being picked. So strawberries doubled in price because a lot of them rotted in the fields rather than got picked. So we had all these problems at the same time. At the same time, we had this massive surge of demand. I predicted it. And I also predicted that once it settles down and the supply chains get back to normal, manufacturers have oversupplied, retailers have oversupplied. So you're going to start to see a lot of things come down in price very quickly. So it brings inflation down. Interest rates will start falling because they had to go up, and they'll start falling. Before you know it, we've got a little mini boom on our hands. Because it won't be as bad as what it was before. Coal, say gas prices have come down. Petrol's come down. I mean, I see petrol at less than 150 a litre now. I think 138 for petrol the other day. Well, it was touching 190 at one stage. Yeah. So everything's coming down. The cycle's going on a downward trajectory. So we're going to start to see things pick up. So all of a sudden, the crisis that we had, we avert. And then we're sitting there going, what happened there? Just like COVID. What happened there?
Yeah. What the fuck?
I remember saying at a meeting in Oxford, Gilly Barlow's meeting, and I sat there in front of them all. I think it was the 10th of March. There was no talk of the lockdowns at our stage because we'd only had a few cases come.
Yeah, it was the end of March, wasn't it? It happened.
Yeah. And I turned around and said, everyone's going to get locked down. The government are going to print money like there's no tomorrow. They're going to chuck it around like it's confetti. And no one will have to worry. And you will be locked down. And everyone's looking at me saying, no, ain't going to happen.
You lunatic.
And I could predict it because I could see what other countries were doing. And we had a virus that was out the bottle. The genie was out the bottle. You can't have open borders and stop a virus. You can't. You just can't do it. And I could tell what's going to happen. So as property investors or traders or developers, if you're in the property game, you need to pay attention to all these things because they're going to affect you. You know, the cost of living crisis is affecting tenants more than the normal homeowner. So you should be aware of that. You should be helping them or doing whatever's necessary. You should be aware of the fact that interest rates could rise substantially anytime soon. So it's paying attention, really. That's what's important. And understand the simple, basic principles. Life is simple, people complicate it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what I'm hearing as well is our strategies, for a want of a better term, are very different. But the thing that we have that's similar is we stick with the same thing. Like, we know what we're doing. And I'm going to say it doesn't matter whether the market's going up, down, or flat. You'll trade. Same for me.
Well, all I do is I stop trading. Fortunately, and I say fortunate, again, going back to what you was asking me earlier about learning from things, I take the positive out of Zoe, because Zoe passed away just as the market was going wobbly, stopped me from buying anything. Actually done me a favour, because I sat on my hands.
Yeah,
I just sat on my hands, and then made a few decisions different, and it enabled me that breathing space. Whereas I might have been looking at things slightly differently if she was still alive, and I may have bought a few things that perhaps I shouldn't have done. So there you go. Always an upside somewhere.
There's always an upside, definitely. And I think it's that my coach reminded me of this the other day, and she went, you have to have a breakdown to get a breakthrough. And it's in the breakdown, remembering that, like, there's a breakthrough coming. It's okay. Can't have growth without the pain.
There you go. Hopefully it's been useful today.
It has. It's been epic talking to you again. And I really appreciate your sharing of your journey and your pain. And just sharing it so that people get, it's like, I'm not on my own. In, you know, whether it be in property or dealing with having kids or the death of someone, it's really powerful when those of us that have been through shit share it so that people get.
And I think it's easy for people to look at me and think, oh, it's all right for him because he's, you know, he's made it, or he's, you know, his life's great, but you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't never know. I mean, I never spoke about Zoe openly, about her troubles and stuff, and I speak about it openly now, because before she died, she spoke about her, you know, how she'd like, you know, to leave a legacy, even though she was going to take her own life. And so I said, you know, we were going to do podcasts together, but we never got that chance, which is a shame.
And yet she lives on, right? So you're sharing her story and what happened. And
and I will tell the story about how magnificent she was, because she was truly a magnificent, strong person. Even though she's no longer with us, she was, some of the things she did in her life were fantastic. On that note, I'm going to have to shoot, I'm afraid.
We are. Let's wrap it up. And if anyone's heard this, and what are you up to, in the sense of, if people hear you're talking, like, because I know you used to do property stuff, and now you're like, what can you offer if people are like, I really love listening to you and I want to do more stuff with you? What are you up to?
I've got a podcast on, actually, you see, mine's on YouTube. So if they search Paul Ribbons on YouTube, you'll find me.
Yeah, we'll put the links as well.
Yeah. And then I'm going to be quite active in that sort of personal development field, because I want to take that saying, which is, you know, that she left me with, and I help take people with shit situations and turn them into something worth fighting for, because that's what I did for her. That's what I do for many of my clients, and that's where the route I want to go down. So if you know, people are struggling and they don't know what to do, seek me out. You know, they can go to my YouTube channel, subscribe and watch the videos, or email me at paul@paulribbons.com.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Thanks, Paul. Right. And just again, what a great contribution. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, everyone.
All the best.